Okay, cool. All right, there we go. All right, so yeah, so today we're going to be doing a homework review over Ruby and sort of creating a shopping cart uh, application for the terminal. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I'm sharing my VS Code. Is everyone able to see that okay? Perfect,
Yes.
okay, awesome, that's good. All right, so all right, so I already have some code sort of laid out here. It's very basic. It's kind of just like a skeleton of the application. So we're going to go through, we're going to kind of fill everything out together and do some of the CRUD actions, mainly adding and deleting to several parts of this app. So let's just kind of walk through what I have going on so far. So in this file, at the very top, I have a variable here, and I'm calling it inventory. So if you kind of look at this application, there's this sort of main menu function here, and you can see that it puts this text here. I'm calling this application lamazon.com. It's a crappy shopping site in your terminal brought to you by yours truly. So if we run this right now and look at it, this is kind of what pops up. See, lamazon.com, choose an option below, and it gives us some menu options. So that's kind of what I have so far, and that's basically it. So up here in this inventory variable that I've created, I've assigned it an array. So the opening bracket for the array is here, the closing bracket for the array is here. Inside of this array are 3 hashes. So we got #1, then a comma. So that allows us to put the second item, which is #2, then a comma, and then #3. So we have 3 products that are available essentially for customers to like quote unquote buy. We've got a surfboard, we have a MacBook Pro, and we have a Game Boy. And then I also have a price and an ID number for each of those. I also have this shopping cart variable here. And right now it is just an empty array. I wrote this here kind of just as a placeholder. We're going to be using this down the road, and we're going to be throwing some items from our inventory into our shopping cart. And we're going to be accessing that shopping cart to see if we've ordered something, and we can see what we've ordered, we can see the price, and then it'll also give us a price total of all of the items that we've ordered. But when you first start out and you run the application, you run the program, you haven't ordered anything, and so your shopping cart is empty, and that's why starting out by default, it's just an empty array. But this will change as we kind of go through and work with the app. So that's those. The next main part of the app is this function that I have right here. So it's a function definition. I'm calling it main menu. We've got the def here. The whole function definition ends down here with this end statement. And then it's got a whole bunch of stuff inside of here. The first thing that this function does is it puts out to the terminal this text right here. Then after that, it's going to put out this text. So our lamazon.com sort of like logo, banner, or whatever. And then the 3 options that our user is able to choose from. Then once this gets put into the console, I want to pause the application and allow the user to basically type in a choice based off of this menu. And so that's what I'm doing right here. I'm doing user input. This is a variable, this user input. I named it that. I could have named this anything. I could name this user choice. I could name it X. I could name it my name. It doesn't really matter. But when you're naming variables, it's helpful to be as descriptive as possible as far as trying to describe what that variable is going to hold or represent in the application. So I'm going to say, okay, user choice is a variable, and that is going to equal this gets.chomp.toI. So gets in Ruby is essentially a special function that's built into Ruby that will pause the application and allow the user to type something in. Because computers are extremely literal, when the user types something in and then hits enter, the computer also remembers that the user typed enter. And they're going to also pick up that return, that enter key press that the user did, and pass that into the variable, as well as the choice that they made. We don't want that return character, that press of the enter key to be part of our user choice variable. We just want to get the number. So to get rid of that enter key, we do a .chomp. Also, whenever we do a gets in Ruby, whatever the user types in, even if it's a number, even if it's like the number 1 or like 1,000, Ruby automatically converts that to a string. So if they type in 1,000, Ruby's going to take that and it's going to turn it into the string, into the string 1,000. We don't necessarily want it to be a string. We want it to be an integer. We want it to be a number. So that's what this toI does, is it takes whatever the user typed in, and in case it's, well, it'll always be a string, but in the case it's a string, it'll turn it into a number for us. So once we get that, then I have some basic if statements here. I have if the user input, whatever the user types in, if that equals 1, then I want to run a function that I'm calling shopping menu. So if they choose 1 to go shopping, then I want our program to run this shopping menu function. And we'll go through that in just a second. If they select 2, view cart, I want to run this cart menu method. And that's going to be a menu that will show up that will give the user some options to kind of do some things with their shopping cart, like view it, remove an item from it, etc. Then at the very end, if the user input equals 3, I want the program to exit or close. So that's what's going on here. So pretty standard stuff. I think probably all of you have kind of probably gone through something similar to this with all of your like apps and homework assignments that you've done thus far, which is why we're not really going to go spend a lot of time on this, but that's what's going on there.
It looks like you need to put your input instead of choice.
Input
for line 23.
Oh, thanks. I think I changed that when I forgot it. Perfect. That would have totally broken things. Yeah. So anyways, that's that. So let's go and let's now look at this shopping menu. So if the user selects 1, let's look at what's going to happen. So we're going to call shopping menu. The definition for shopping menu is here. I'm just going to bump that up a little bit. All right. So if they select shopping menu, this will run. The first thing that happens is we have a bunch of put statements, and it's basically going to put this text into our console. So it's going to say shopping menu, and then it'll say choose from below, view available products, view your cart, or return to the main menu. And then I just put like a blank space just so that there's kind of some space between the menus and the columns. It's a little easier to read. Then I'm going to do the exact same thing that we did up here. I'm going to get the user input, and then I have another series of if statements. So if they select 1 for view available products, I'm going to run another function called item selection menu. This is where I'm going to basically list out all of the items and allow the user to choose if they want to add an item to their shopping cart. We will do that in just a sec. If the user selects number 2, view cart, I'm going to do a different function. It's going to be the cart menu, which will show their shopping cart and any items that they have ordered or put into their shopping cart, as well as a total price that will total up all of the prices of all of the items that they have put into their shopping cart. And then again, if they hit 3, return to the main menu, I'm going to rerun main menu. So it's going to run this again, and the app will kind of like start over from the beginning. So that's what's going on here. Are there any like big questions about this sort of like beginning part of the app? Cool. Okay, so let's move on and let's get into like the actual like the more interesting. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Is this in Slack that I could like get the code, or should I just type it all out?
So if you want to code along with me, you can. Here, I'll actually do this. Let me Slack this to you guys. Part-time group, do you guys have access to the help desk channel?
The one we have is a part-time summer. I'm not sure about that channel.
No worries. Let me Slack this into the part-time group as well. Okay, so full-time, I went ahead and Slacked that out in the help desk channel, and part-time, I Slacked this out in the part-time channel.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, so yeah, if you want to code along, that's cool. This will also be on YouTube, so you can see the code there. And I'm also going to put this onto my GitHub, where you guys can go and see all the code there as well. So you guys will have access to all of this. But okay, yeah, so let's go ahead and move on. Let's get into the interesting stuff. So okay, let's kind of work with number one. So this item selection menu. So we're in our shopping menu. The user wants to view all of our available products. So let's go ahead and do some stuff here. So the first thing I want to do is for the item selection menu is I always like to put a blank line just so that it all starts out on a new block and it's not all like squished together. So I'm going to go ahead and put a new line, and then I'm just going to put some text. I'm going to say select a product below to add to cart. And I'll do a colon and we'll close that out. Then I'm going to put one more blank line just for some space. And then now, after I put that text out, I want to list out all of the available products. In other words, I want to show that we have a surfboard, we have a MacBook, we have a Game Boy, and I want to show the price for those things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little comment. I'm going to say loop through inventory and show all products and prices. So that's what we want to do here. So what I'm going to do in order to make that happen is I'm going to get my inventory, and I'm going to do a dot each with index. And I'm going to hit enter and get that end statement there. Okay. So what this does is it takes my inventory, which we can access because this variable has this @ symbol here. What that @ symbol does is it makes the variable available to the entire file, even if we're inside of a function definition, even if we're in between the def and the end here, we can still grab our inventory. If I didn't have that @ symbol there and I tried to do this, I would get a bug. Ruby would throw an error and it wouldn't work because inside of a function definition, it can only look for things and it can only look for variables that are defined inside of here. But you can see that inventory is defined outside of this definition. It's not in here, it's out here. But to bypass that, we can actually change the scope of the variable, add the @ symbol in front of it, and make it an instance variable. And now we have access to it. So what the inventory.each with index does is it's going to look at our inventory, which is an array. So the .each and the .each with index methods are methods that you can only do on arrays and on hashes. But what it's going to do is it's going to look at each individual item inside of our inventory array. So it's going to look at this item here, which is a hash, and it's our surfboard and all of its info. Then it's going to look at the second item, which is the MacBook and all its info. And then finally, it's going to look at the third item. And it's going to do that in like numerical, like a consecutive order, like one at a time. And as it looks at each item inside of the array that we call each with index on, it's going to do whatever code we put in here. So it's going to say, okay, we're at our inventory. We're going to do a dot each with index, and we'll talk about the with index in just a second. But let's just worry about the dot each. So it's going to say, okay, we're at our inventory. We're going to do a dot each. Okay, so that means if I'm Ruby, I'm going to go to the inventory, and I'm going to look at each item in that array individually. And for each item, I'm going to do this code. I'm going to do whatever is inside of here. So let's do put, and I'm going to say the name. Okay, so before we get into that, let's talk about the with index. So dot each with index do vi. So the dot each, if you don't have the with index, that is going to only look at the value of each item in your array. So in other words, it will look at this hash, and then it will look at this hash, and then it will look at this hash. If we called, I'm just going to write some like note code down here. If we had an array, let's say that was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's a little more simple than the one above. It's not an array of hashes, it's just an array of these 5 numbers. If we were to do an array dot each do, we'll do the, and we were to do a dot each on this array, what it's going to do is it's going to look at the value of each one of these items. It's going to say, okay, value 1 is the number 1. The value for the second item is the number 2. The value for the third item is the number 3. The value for the fourth item is 4, and the fifth item is 5. What the each with index does is it allows us to not only look at the value, but also at the index. And so we have access to that number as well. So in this case, with the each with index, it'll look at the first value, so 1, but then we also have access to the index. And the index for the number 1 here is 0. So the index is basically what number that item is in the array. And arrays start with the number 0. So for this first item, v is the value. It's going to equal 1. And the I, the index, will equal 0. Then it'll do whatever we want in here. When that's done, it'll say, okay, cool. Let's go to the next item, 2. Sweet. So the v for this item number is going to be the number 2, and the index will be 1 because the indices start with 0. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it'll do that all the way up. So with 3, with this number here, the v, the value will be 3, and the index will be 2. Here, the v will be 4, index will be, or yeah, the v will be 4, the index will be 3, and here the value will be 5, and the index will be 4. So if we take that and we apply that to this array, which instead of numbers, like a list of numbers, it's a list of hashes, we can say, okay, the v for item 1 is going to be this entire hash, but the I is the index, and the I for this item is going to be 0. Then it'll run whatever code we write in that block on this item here. When that's done, it's going to say, okay, let's go to the second one. Okay, the v for this second item in our inventory array is going to be this hash. So it's going to be this whole thing. It's going to be this hash with an ID of 2, the name of MacBook Pro, and the price of 2000. That's the v. But the I, the index, will be 1. And it'll do the exact same thing here. The v will be this, but the I, the index, will be 2 because it goes 0, 1, 2 for the indices. So what we can say is, okay, let's not worry about the I for now. We have access to it. Let's not worry about it. Let's just look at our value. Let's put the value and then the name for each one of these. So we're saying, okay, let's do the V name. So if we look at this, the V is going to stand for the value, and it's going to go one at a time through our array. So we're going to say, okay, the first time we go through, it's going to look at this and say, okay, cool. Here's V. V is this hash right here. So we're going to say, okay, we want to do the V, but we want to print out to the console the name. So it's going to print out the word surfboard into our console. Then, so it does that. It puts V, which is that first item in our array. And in this case, it's that first hash. Then it'll print out the name, which is surfboard. Then gets to here and it's done. But Ruby is smart and it knows that we have two more items in this array. So it's not done. It's going to go back to here and say, okay, we just did item 1. Let's go down and do item 2 now. Okay, so V is this hash, and we want to print out the V name for this second item, which will be MacBook Pro. So then it's going to print MacBook Pro into the terminal. Then it'll reach the end and it'll say, okay, cool. I know I have one more item to go. It'll go back to the beginning and it'll say, okay, cool. Our last item here is the third item. Cool. V is now this hash, and we want to put the V name for this, which is Game Boy. So it'll put Game Boy into the console. So it'll go, okay, cool. Print surfboard, done. Let's go back to the second item, print MacBook Pro, done. Okay, let's go back and do the third item, and we'll put Game Boy. So that's what's happening here. So what we should see is if we select our item selection menu, which should be this view available products, which is option 1. If we hit option 1, it'll run our item selection menu function, which is here, and it should put this text, and then it should list out our 3 items in our inventory. So let's go ahead and give that a try. So there we go. Let's go ahead and hit 1, go shopping, boom. Okay, shopping menu, choose from below. So we want to view available products. Now, when I hit enter, it should give me my 3 product names. Sweet, there we go. Surfboard, MacBook Pro, and Game Boy. So that's what's going on with that index right there. Oh, sorry, with this dot each with index. What we can also do is we can have access to the I. So if we do put I right here, this is now not looking at the V, it's looking at the index. It's looking at the I. So what it's going to do, it's going to say, okay, let's start with our first item. Okay, and we're doing puts I. So it's going to say, okay, well, we're on item number 1. The I is going to equal 0 because the index will be 0, and it will print the number 0 into our terminal. Then it'll go to the second one and say, okay, we're looking at the I for the second thing in our array, which will be index 1, and it'll print that. Do the same thing with the third item, and it'll print the number 2. So let's just test that just to kind of see it in action. So we'll go here, we'll go shopping, view available products, and there we go, 0, 1, 2. We've got our indices. So now we can do both. We can put the I and we can put our V name. And now that's going to give us both. So we do that, go shopping, go to products, boom. We got our 0 surfboard, our 1 MacBook Pro, and our 2 Game Boy. So that's kind of how this dot each with index is working and how it is looking at the array and how it's using both the value and the index for each item in the array. And it runs whatever code is in here on each item one at a time. So what we want to do is we don't just want to, list out the index and whatever. We want to make it look a little better for the user. So I'm going to do some interpolation. So I want to print out a string that's a little bit longer that has some more information, but I still want to bring in the V and the I. So if you print a string in Ruby, if I just do that, that's not going to print the V value for this. That's going to print the letter V because it's in quotes. That V is now a string, so it's just the letter V. But we can still bring in these variable names, this V and this I, into a string and still have access to the V like we want it to. The way that we do that is we do a hashtag, we do brackets, and then we throw the variable in there. So now that will print out our V. So if we do V name like that, that's going to print out, again, Surfboard, MacBook Pro, and Game Boy. But because this is in a string, if I add 3 exclamation points there, it's going to print out Surfboard, MacBook Pro, Game Boy, but it's going to have 3 exclamation points at the end of each of those. So if we do this, go shopping, there we go. So now we're able to grab the V name from each item in our array, but we're also able to add some additional text, like these quotation marks, or sorry, not the quotation marks, the exclamation marks. Knowing that, we can add basically any copy, whatever text we want, we can add to these values. So what I want to do is I'm going to say, I want to bring in our index number. I'm going to do a +1. I want to number each of these items in my inventory. And I'm going to do that by grabbing the index number, but adding 1 to it, because humans don't really count starting with 0. We count starting at 1. So I want the computer to print 0, 1, 2, but add 1 to each of those. So it'll actually print 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to do the I +1. And then I'm going to put a period after that. So it'll be like 1 period, 2 period, 3 period, just like a numerical list. Then I want to bring in my V name, and I want to print out the name there, and maybe do a hyphen, and I'm going to put a $sign, and I'm going to bring in not the V name, but the V price. So now what I should get is the index number +1, a period, the product name, a hyphen, a $sign, and the product price. So let's just make sure that that works. Go shopping. Awesome. Okay, select a product below to add to cart. Cool. So we got 1, got a surfboard for $200. 2, we got a MacBook Pro, and 3, we've got a Game Boy. So that's good. Now we want to be able to interact with that menu. So after our .h with index and after we show all those products, we want to again get the user input. And what I want to do with this is I also want to allow the user to select how many of each item they want to add to their shopping cart. So let's say they select, okay, I want a surfboard, but they want to order 6 of them because, I don't know, they have a little family of surfers. And I want them to be able to select the surfboard and then say, and I want 6 of them, and then I want to add those to my shopping cart. So what I need to do is I actually need to get a couple of things. So I need to get the user input choice. So this, I'm going to pause the app after we show all of the products, and I want to allow the user to type in some input, and I'm going to call that the user choice. That's going to be the choice of the product that they want. So let's say they choose surfboard, that's going to get stored here. Great. Then I'm just going to put a blank line, and then I'm going to do, okay, so once they choose the product that they want, I'm going to tell them, okay, type number of items to add to cart. So now they can choose how many surfboards they want to add. So now I'm going to do, instead of user input choice, I'm going to do user input number equals get.chomp.2i. So now user input choice has the product that they want to purchase. User input number has the amount, the number of products that they want to add to their cart for that one product. So once I do that, I need to now check some things. I need to check user input choice with each product in the inventory. And if there's a match, add that product to the shopping cart the number of times the user said. So what that means is, let's say the user chose number 1 surfboard. I then want to take that user input choice and I want to go through my inventory array and be like, okay, is there a surfboard in here? And if there is, and there is, that's good, add that to the shopping cart. But I want to add it to the shopping cart the number of times that they specify. So if they want to buy 3 surfboards, I want them to add a surfboard to the shopping cart 3 times. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to have to do another .each. We're going to loop through our inventory and we're going to do some checks. We're going to check the user input choice against the products that we have in our inventory. So I'm going to do @inventory.each with index again, do, and I'm going to do VI. Again, these here, this V and this I, these are kind of like variables in that you can name these anything. Like I could call like this V up here, I could call that Taylor. I could call this one like Henry. And as long as this matches these down here, so I would have to change these V's to say Taylor, and I have to change the I to say Henry. As long as those match, then you're good to go. These are really just placeholders. The important thing to know though is that with .each with index, the first variable that's inside of these pipes here, the first one is going to be the placeholder for the value. The second one is going to be a placeholder for the index. And it's kind of convention to use V and I, just because it's easy to remember, like V stands for value, I stands for the index. But really, technically, you can name them anything you want. But I always just do VI. All right, so we're going to do an inventory.each with index. We're going to get our values and our indices. And what we want to do is we want to do some comparison. So I'm going to say if user input choice, and that's going to be the number of the product that they want. So for example, when we list out our products, like surfboard has the number 1, MacBook 2, Game Boy 3. If they type in the number 1, that's going to be the surfboard. So I want to say, okay, if the user input choice, which let's say they chose surfboard, so in this case it would be the number 1, if that equals, and we're going to compare that with the index. But we know that the index starts at 0, so it's going to be, but if the user chose number 1 for surfboard, that's actually going to really, to Ruby, be index 0. So we need to kind of trick Ruby. We want to say, okay, if the user input equals the 0 plus 1, so if user input choice, which would be 1 for the surfboard, if that equals the index, which will never happen because they're different. So if it equals the index plus 1, then in that case, surfboard is matching surfboard. If those are the same, then we want to do another loop. We're going to do user input number dot times do, and we'll go through this, but at shopping cart dot push v. Okay, so what we're saying is if user input choice, which in this case is 1 because they want a surfboard, if that equals 0 plus 1, which would be 1, so those are the same. So if those are the same, then we want to do this code here this many times. So the dot times do is another loop where you specify a number, you do a dot times, then you do a do, and then whatever code is in here will happen this many times. So I could make that 100, and I could say, okay, we want to do this code, the shopping cart dot push v. We want to do that 100 times. But we actually don't want to do it 100 times. We want to do it this many times. We want to do it the user input number times, because that's the number of products that they said that they want to order. So if they wanted to order it 3 times, they would hit the number 3, hit enter, the number 3 would get stored here. Then we're saying, okay, let's do 3 dot times do, and then let's push the V, which is the value, into our shopping cart. And the V in this case is going to be the surfboard. So what will happen there is this entire thing will get thrown and copied into our shopping cart array. So let's go ahead. Oh, and then actually after all of that, so once we're done ordering, we want to run the shopping menu again. So let's go ahead and let's run this code and let's see how it looks. All right, so we got lamazon.com. Let's hit 1 to go shopping. Sweet. Let's hit 1 to view available products. Cool. Select a product below to add to cart. All right, we want a surfboard. So we'll hit 1 for a surfboard. Hit enter. Okay. Type number of items to add to cart. I want 6 surfboards because I'm an extra surfer apparently. We'll hit 6. Boom. Okay. So it did it, and then it reran. So it did this, added it to our cart, and then it reran shopping menu. So went back and reran this. So went back to that menu that we were just at. But now what I can do is I should be able to actually, okay, yeah, we haven't set up our cart yet, but we'll do that in just a sec. But what it did is it added all 6 of those surfboards into my shopping cart. So let's now set up our shopping cart. So the shopping cart is what's going to happen whenever we want to view our shopping cart. So I'm going to do a put, again, just make a blank line just to give some space. I'm going to say, okay, your shopping cart. Let's just, I don't know, do some of these, just kind of separate it out a little bit. We'll do another puts. We'll say, okay, so it'll say your shopping cart. We'll have a little dotted line. And then we want it to say maybe like current items in cart or something. And we'll do one more extra space. Okay, so we're going to have some text, your shopping cart, a line, then the current items in cart. Now we want to show all of the items inside of our cart. So again, to do that, it's going to be very similar to what we did right here, where we went through our inventory array and then we put a bunch of stuff from that inventory, but we did it for each individual line. But now, well, whenever we select 6 surfboards to purchase, we're going to have 6 surfboards in here. So we want to display each surfboard individually. So we're going to do the exact same thing, but instead of doing it on our inventory, we're going to do it on our shopping cart. So we're going to say, okay, at shopping cart, and then we're going to do another dot each with index do, and do the B in the I, okay? Now I want to basically make this look very similar to when we were doing a list of all of our available products to purchase. So I'm going to interpolate in the index number plus 1, so I can kind of get that like number with the period for each item. Then I'm going to interpolate the name of each product, and then I'm going to do the price of each product, like that. Okay, cool. Then, okay, so let's just look at that for now. So we'll go here, we'll run this. All right, lamazon.com, go shopping, view all available products. All right, let's pick MacBook, and let's say we want 3 MacBooks. Cool. So now if we view cart, we should see 1, 2, 3, and we should see 3 MacBooks there. So 2, view cart, boom, there we go. So here's our shopping cart. We've got 3 MacBook Pros in there because we're super rich apparently. So we got that going. Now, I also want to show the total price of everything in my cart. So I was kind of thinking about the way that I wanted to do this. There's a lot of ways to solve basically every problem in programming, but the way that I thought of it is I am going to create a variable here that's just going to live inside of this function. So it's not going to have an @ symbol or anything. It's just going to live in here. And it's going to be called cart total. And I'm just going to set it equal to 0. It's going to start out at 0. But then we're going to make that increase. So the way that I'm going to do that is we have our shopping cart here. And then I'm going to say cart total plus equals the price. Okay, so what this does here is we're already looping over each item in our cart. So let's say, so like at this point in time, let's say we ordered 3 MacBook Pros. Our shopping cart's going to look kind of like this. It's going to be like MacBook Pro, MacBook Pro. And there's going to be 3 of those here, but it's not going to look like this. Each of these items is going to be like this entire thing. So it's actually going to look more like this. But after we order 3 MacBook Pros, it's going to look like that. That's what our shopping cart will look like. So what we want to do is we want to add up the price of each of these. So right here, we're already looping over our shopping cart. We're saying, okay, let's go to each item one at a time, and let's do this. Let's put the index +1. Okay, so the first one, the index is 0. Give it a +1, it'll be 1. Okay, put the number 1 here, add a period, then put the name. Okay, the name of the first item is MacBook Pro, cool. Then put a dash and put a $sign, then put the V price. Okay, 2,000. Done. Let's go to the next item, and it does that again. It does that for all 3. Then I also want it to take my cart total here, which equals 0, and I want to add the price to my cart total for each item. So right now, the first time it goes through and it does like, it like prints out the index +1 and the period and the MacBook Pro name and then the price. After that, it's going to say, okay, take the cart total, which right now is 0, and do a plus equals. That is shorthand for this. Cart total equals cart total plus whatever. In this case, it's going to be 2,000 because it's going to be our V price, which is this. So what we're saying is cart total. And at this point, we've only gone through this one time. It's going to be 0. So 0 equals 0 plus 2,000. So cart total at the end of this will equal $2,000. But this plus equals is shorthand for this. So instead of having to write that out, you can just do cart total plus equals that. And that will just add this to whatever that number is. Okay, so that's cool. So at the end of the first loop, it's going to print out our MacBook Pro, and then it's going to make our cart total equal $2,000. Okay, then it's going to go and do it again. So, but it's going to start on, it's going to do line number 2. I don't know why I highlighted all of that, but it's going to do line number 2. And it's going to say, okay, cool, print out the name, print out the price, then take cart total, and now our cart total equals 2,000. But we're saying, okay, say 2,000 equals 2,000 plus this, and that is another 2,000. So our cart total is going to equal 4,000. Then it's going to do it a third time, and it's going to print out MacBook Pro again. If only it'll have the number 3 in front of it because of this right here for index +1. But then we're going to say, okay, now cart total plus equals the price. Well, at this point, our cart total equals 4,000. And we're going to add another 2,000, this 2,000 right here, the last one, to that. So it'll equal 6,000. So once we've done that, we can, I'm just going to delete that. Once we've done that, we can now print out that total to our console. So I'm going to do just another kind of like dotted line, just for some, I don't know, design, I guess. I'm going to say cart total. I'm going to do a $sign. And then now I'm going to interpolate our cart total variable, which at this point should equal $6,000 because of our 3 MacBook Pros that we're going to put in there. Then I'm just going to do another little space there. And okay, cool. So we'll just do that for now. Sweet. Okay. So let's test it out and make sure it works. So I'm just going to clear out my console. To do that, you just hit Command K, and that will kind of clear your console so you can kind of get a fresh start so you can see everything sort of at the top, if that makes sense. And let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so let's go shopping. Let's view our products. Let's choose MacBook Pro. And we want to buy 3 of them. Boom. Okay, so we bought 3. So now, and then it runs our shopping menu again. So now what I can do is I can select number 2, view our cart, and we should see 3 MacBook Pros plus a price total of $6,000. Cool, there we go. All right, current items in cart. We got our 3 MacBook Pros that we chose, and our cart total is going to be $6,000. So that's awesome. That's exactly what we want. Let's see. So now what I want to do is let's create, well, first off, up to this point, do any of you guys have any questions, or does anything that I did like not quite make sense or feel unclear? We kind of just went through a lot of stuff, but. Cool, all right, seems like everyone's good. So now what we're gonna do is we have the ability now to add items to our cart, but we also want the ability to delete items from our cart. So we can look at our shopping cart, we can be like, before I check out, I actually only want 2 MacBook Pros, or I want, actually change my mind, I want no MacBook Pros, but I want 6 surfboards instead. So what we're gonna do to do that is I'm just going to, let's see, what's the good way to maybe do this? Cart total, okay. So I'm actually going to put another put here. I'm going to say, I'm going to ask the user. So once they look at their cart, it'll show everything in their cart. It'll show the total price. And then at the very bottom, it's going to say, do you want to remove an item? And I'll give it, you know, yes or no. You can choose yes or no. Put in the little blank space. And then I need to do another user input. But I'm just going to call this one user input remove equals get.chomp. So I'm just calling it user input remove because this is going to be the user input based on whether they want to remove an item or not. I'm not going to do the .2i because we don't need to convert their answer into an integer because they're going to be typing in either y or n for yes or no. So it's already a string, so that's fine. But we do want to get rid of the return key character. So we'll still do the chomp. But we're going to do, okay, user input remove equals gets.chomp. So we're going to get whether they chose yes or no. Then what we want to do is we want to say, okay, if user input remove equals y, so if they chose y, then let's run this function here. And it's going to be called remove item from cart. And then we'll say, else if user input remove equals no, then we will do this. We want to return to the main menu. And this is a function that we'll write out in just a second, but it's a function that's going to take us back to the main menu, basically. Okay, so sweet. So now we have the ability to ask the user if they want to remove an item, and then we can store their choice here. If their choice is Y, we'll run this remove item function. Okay, so this function, this is where the magic is going to happen to remove an item from our shopping cart. So once this runs, I want it to put some text. So I'm going to do another blank space, and I'm just going to do put, let's do like type the item number you want to remove. We'll do that. Then we're going to, again, get the user input. I'm just going to call it user input this time. Get dot sum.toI, because they're going to be selecting a number. We want to get that as an integer, so we're going to do the toI. Cool. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to take the number of the item that they chose. So for example, let's say they were looking at their shopping cart here, and they were like, okay, I want to get rid of this MacBook Pro, the middle one, number 2. They would type in the number 2 to get rid of it. I want to take that choice, and I want to filter that out of my shopping cart array. So the way to do that is I'm going to take my shopping cart array, and I'm going to set it equal to something new. And that something new is going to be a copy of itself, but minus the item that the user wants to remove. And so here's how we're going to do that. We're going to do, okay, let's set our shopping cart to equal the shopping cart dot select dot with index do vi. Okay, so what the dot select does, it's very similar to dot each and dot, yeah, like it's very similar to dot each in that it goes through each line one at a time inside of your array, and then it does this code to each one. The only difference is that what select is really good at is it's good at comparing values, basically. So you can feed this like a value, and you can check to see if that item that it's currently on has that value or equals that value. And if it does, keep it in your array. But if it doesn't, it will remove it from your array. So what I want to do is I want to say I plus 1 does not equal user input, and that needs to have it closed right there. All right, so what this is saying is, okay, we're going to go through our shopping cart. And if you remember when I had my shopping cart down here and we had those 3 MacBook Pros, we can see it here, only these are, you know, in a hash, but you can't really see it because of how we formatted it with our puts. But we have these 3 MacBook Pros, and it's going to go through each one. It's going to start with the first one, but okay, here's MacBook Pro 1 inside of your shopping cart. And it's going to say, okay, if the index plus 1, so in this case, on our first line item, that's going to be the number 1 because the index is 0, but 0 plus 1 equals 1. So if index plus 1, 0 plus 1, or in other words, 1, does not equal the user input. And remember, our user said we want to get rid of number 2. Okay, so we want to, number 2 is what our user input equals. So if 1 does not equal 2, then get rid of it. Okay, it's gonna, it will automatically, like Ruby magic style, we don't have to do anything to make it do this. It will get rid of it. That's what the dot select does. So it's going to say, yeah, if these are not equal, oh, sorry, I think I got it mixed up, which I do with select all the time. If this is true, it will keep it. If it's false, it'll get rid of it. So in this case, if 1 does not equal 2, if that's true, then keep that in our array. So in other words, we're going to keep this inside of our shopping cart. And it'll say, okay, cool, that's done. Let's now go to the second item. and it's going to say, okay, so on line item 2, if I plus 1, so for the second item in our array, the index will be 1. So it's going to be 1 plus 1, that's going to equal 2. So if 2 does not equal 2, because our user input was 2, they chose number 2 to delete. So if 2 does not equal 2, then get rid of it, because 2 does equal 2. So 2 not equaling 2 is false, like that's not true. Because that's false, it's going to say, okay, let's get rid of this one. Then it's going to do the same thing. It's going to check the third one, and it's going to say, okay, the index for the third item is 2, but 2 plus 1 is 3. So it's saying 3 does not equal 2. Okay, cool. That's false. So let's keep that one. Cool. So we kept this, we got rid of this, and we kept this. And then we set that to be our new shopping cart. So our shopping cart is only going to have the 2 items inside of it. So we want to run that, and then as soon as we're done removing items, let's just run our cart menu again. So we go back to our cart menu. So let's go ahead and take a look at this, and let's just make sure it works. Because we just went
Can I
through a lot
ask
of
a
code.
question?
Yeah.
For that I plus 1, could we do
Yeah.
it I equals user input minus 1?
Yes, yeah, that's another way to do it. Like, and honestly, either way works. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. I tend to do all of my arithmetic on that kind of stuff on the index itself. And honestly, that's how I usually see it in code. I don't know, honestly, off the top of my head, like what the advantages are or if that's the best practice or not. But yeah, technically, yeah, we could just do I does not equal user input minus 1, and that would get the same result. So yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and make sure it works. So, all right, so let's view our shopping cart right now to see, cool, nothing's in the cart, $0. That's exactly what we want. Do you want to remove an item? No, that's going to break because we haven't set up our no case. So we have like, if user input equals no, then do this, but that doesn't have anything in it, so it's going to break. So yeah, but we do know that when we first run our program, our shopping cart is empty. All right, so let's go to Go Shopping. Let's view our available products. And this time, let's buy a surfboard and let's buy 2 of those. Okay, cool. Let's view our available products again, and let's choose MacBook Pro, and let's buy 3 of those. Let's view our available products one more time. Let's buy a Game Boy, and we'll just buy 1 Game Boy. Cool. All right, so now let's view our cart. Okay, sweet. So we got our 2 surfboards here. We've got our 3 MacBook Pros and our 1 Game Boy. And so our cart total is $6,550. Cool. All right. So now it's asking us, do we want to remove an item? Let's say we're like, yeah, let's get rid of this Game Boy because now the Switch is out and it's way better than like the 1986 Game Boy. So we're going to say, yeah, we want to get rid of that. So type the item number you want to remove. Okay, so we want to go to the Game Boy. The Game Boy is number 6. So we'll type 6. Cool. So it reprints our cart, but now our cart still has our surfboards, still has our MacBooks, but no longer has our Game Boy. And you can see our cart total has now decreased by $150. So perfect. So we know that that's working. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do is we need to set up this return to main menu function. So when it asks us if we want to remove an item from our shopping cart and we hit no, we need to get that code to work. So if we don't want to, and we want to go back to the main menu, this is what I want to have happen. So I'm going to just do, again, a blank line, just kind of like what I like to do. But so, okay, so what's going to happen is the computer is going to ask this, do you want to remove an item? I don't, so I'm going to select no. As soon as I select no, I want the computer to say, okay, do you want to return to main menu? Yes or no? Like that. Cool. And we'll do that. Okay. So now, just like normal, I'm going to do a user input equals get stuff chomp, because we're going to be typing in a y or an n. I don't need to convert that to an integer, so I'll just leave it there. And then if user input equals y, then run the main menu. So start the app over again. Again, it won't delete, it won't clear our shopping cart. Like our shopping cart will still have all the items in it that we had ordered, but it is going to run this menu again. So, okay, so if they want to go to the main menu, they hit yes, cool, we'll run the main menu. Else, and this is something that I just learned today that I think is like really cool, but I'll explain it to you here in just a sec. One sec, where is it? Return to main menu. That needs to be menu. Okay, so this is what I'm doing here. So I'm saying, okay, if the user types in yes, do this. Else, so if they type anything else, or which includes n, then what I want to do is I want to run this method. I'm going to pass in an argument here, and I want the current menu that I'm on to rerun. So the way that so normally when you pass in arguments, we're very used to them just being values. Like we pass in like a variable that equals like a value, like a simple value, like a number or an array or something. You can actually also pass in functions as an argument. You do that a lot in JavaScript, and we'll get very used to that. I had never done it in Ruby though, so this is just kind of like a little like bonus lesson for you guys. But so I'm passing in this. Again, this is just like a variable name. It's just like an argument variable name. It's a placeholder for whatever I will end up passing in when I call this function. But I'm going to say, okay, this is going to be a function, and if the user chooses anything outside of the letter y, I want to run that function that I just passed in. The way that you run a function that you passed in as an argument is to do method, put in the argument variable for that function, and then dot call, and it will run that function. So where we're going to put that is right here. So what we're going to say is, okay, the computer's going to ask, do you want to remove an item? Yes or no? If yes, then do our remove item function, which we just set up. But if they don't want to remove an item, then let's run this function. So this function is that one that we just did, the return to main menu, and we're going to pass in cart menu as an argument. But when you pass in the function as an argument, you have to add this colon here. It technically makes this into a symbol. It's a little weird and complicated why. We're not going to really get into that, but just know if you want to pass in a function as an argument to another function, just call the function itself, but add a colon at the beginning. So now what we're saying is, okay, return to main menu, and we're passing in cart menu. So this, we're passing this whole function here as an argument. So we're going to go here and say, okay, we're going to run this function. And now current menu is going to equal our cart menu function. So now we're going to say, okay, cool. We're going to put a blank space, put return to main menu, yes or no, get the user input. If the user typed in yes, run the main menu. But if they typed no or anything else, then run current menu. And in this case, that's going to be cart menu, which is going to be this cart, like our shopping cart menu again. So let's check that out and make sure that that works. So we got that. Okay. So let's go to view cart, should be empty. Perfect. Do you want to remove an item? Let's hit no. Do you want to return to main menu? Let's hit yes. And oh, okay, I had a typo. So this is a good practice for reading your error messages. So it says, okay, in this file, shoppingcart.rb on line 137, in my return to main menu function, I have an undefined local variable or method called user input for this. So this is a really helpful error message. Sometimes they are not helpful, and you will find those as you go online, but this is very helpful. So I'm like, oh yeah, cool, okay. They must have forgotten a T. Yep, boom, right there. That kind of stuff just happens all the time. So, all right, so you run this, view cart, do you want to remove an item? No, return to main menu, yes, okay. So that brings us back to our main menu. All right, let's make sure our other thing works. So do you want to remove an item? No. Return to main menu, no. So if I hit no, it should run our shopping cart menu again. All right, cool. So I ran that again. It's asking us again, do you want to remove an item? So yeah, so there's our loop. So now it's going to keep looping. We can kind of like navigate through our app. So we can be like, do you want to remove an item? We'll say no. Return to main menu, yes. Let's go shopping. Let's look at our products. Let's get a surfboard. Let's just get one. Look at our products again. Door MacBook Pro. We'll get 2 products. Game Boy. We'll get like, I don't know, 10 Game Boys. And then let's do our cart. Cool. There's our surfboard, our 2 MacBook Pros, our 10 Game Boys, our cart total. Do you want to remove an item? We'll hit yes. Let's say we want to remove our surfboard. We'll do that. Cool. So you now see our surfboard's gone, but we still got all this stuff. Now, do you want to remove an item? We'll say no. Return to main menu, yes. And there you go. So we're back here. So yeah, that's kind of like the whole app. We're doing some CRUD actions again with our shopping cart. We're adding and removing items into this shopping cart. We're also able to sum up the price of all the items inside of our shopping cart and view that. There's one other thing I wanted to show you guys. It's just kind of a little tip that will help you as you're coding things down the line. But you see this if-else statement. Sometimes if you have a very simple if-else statement that is just kind of like 2 options, like if this, then that, else this, then that, like it's just like the 2 options. There's kind of a shortcut to write it, and it's called a ternary. And ternary is one of my favorite things because they look kind of cool, and they're just shorter and easier to write. So what we can do is instead of doing an if-else statement, we can do this. We can say, so what I'm about to type is going to do exactly what this code right here does. So I'm going to say, okay, user input remove equals y. Then I'm going to do a question mark. So what I'm basically doing, to the computer, what this says is, okay, does user input remove equal the string y? If so, then we want to do this first thing. We want to remove items from cart. Otherwise, that's what this colon is saying. It's saying, okay, if this is true, do this. Otherwise, do whatever is over here. So we're going to do return to main menu and then pass in cart menu as an argument. And now we can get rid of this. I'll just comment it out though. And I'll say, this is an example of a ternary. It does what the if else block below does. Cool. So yeah, so this does exactly what that does. But yeah, that is basically kind of like my whole demo for you guys today. I will go ahead and again, this will go on YouTube. I will send out the GitHub link that will have all of this code for you guys. yeah, do you guys have any questions? So I think we probably have about 5 minutes or so until we will close out the full-time group for the day. So yeah, we have a little bit of time to maybe go over any questions or go over any concepts if you guys have any questions. But yeah, was there anything that was confusing or that you would like me to go more in depth on?
I did have a question about the scope on the variables.
Yep.
So when you call them in those methods, like the define shopping menu or the other methods,
Mhm.
how does like when you call them in the with the each with index,
Mhm.
do you call them with an at or do you call them considering like the
Yeah.
at inventory?
Yeah, so if my variable is an instance variable, which means it is available to the whole file, the way that you designate that variable to be an instance variable is to add that at symbol there. So now this at symbol is like an integral part of that variable. So every time you want to refer to your inventory, or in other words, to this variable, you need to use that at symbol. So down here where I'm doing this loop over my inventory, I have to include the at symbol there for it.
Okay.
And just like if for some reason, like down here, I wanted to do like puts, I just wanted to like put the inventory out, I could do that, but I would have to do it like that.
Okay.
Because this and this are technically two different things. This is a local variable that's just called inventory. This is an instance variable that's called inventory with that at symbol. So
okay,
that wouldn't do anything because we don't have anything that's just called inventory without the at symbol. But if you add that, then it's like, oh, okay, cool, we're gonna print this.
Okay.
With that same thing, if inventory doesn't have the at symbol at the very top, if you did it down here, it would still print it out because it's scoped correctly, right? It's not inside
Exactly.
another function.
Exactly. It's available across the entire file.
Okay. Important.
Cool. Yeah, and like scope can get a little bit confusing, and like especially when we get into JavaScript and doing React, scope becomes a pretty big issue because we start working across files. And so we have various files that have code in it that are doing different things, and we link those together. And sometimes we want to pass variables to be able to be visible and used in other files, even though that variable is defined like just in one file. And so scope starts to get really important, and like you'll get more used to scope and like when to set a variable to a certain scope. But yeah, that's a really, really good question.
Another quick question too.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
About the shopping cart with index. When you use that $, how come it doesn't do a global variable?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because like, so you're saying like, yeah, because you can do a global variable. So yeah, just so everyone knows, like there's lots of types of scope in Ruby. So there's like, if we were just to do like x equals 1, this x is going to be locally scoped. At x equals 1, this x is now going to be scoped for the instance, so for this whole file. You can also do, I think this is how you do it, but you can do a $x equals 1. That is how you globally scope a variable. That makes it available. That's one way to make a variable accessible across multiple files, is to make it globally accessible. That's usually a bad practice. You kind of want to use global variables in, you want to be very, very careful with using those. But yes, the reason that here this isn't making this a variable is because it's inside of a string. So we have our quotes here. So it's the same reason that like, you know, if I were to do, you know, put 1 plus 1, that is going to spit out the number 2 into the console. But if I do put 1 plus 1, that's going to spit out 1 plus 1. Like it's going to say 1 plus 1. It's not going to read that plus as like the math operator that it is. It's just going to see it as a string. So that exact same thing is happening here with that $sign. But yeah, that's a really good question. Cool. I think like James is here. But yeah, before we close out, do you guys have any other like last minute questions or anything else you want me to go over?
Yeah,
Cool.
don't let me stop you.
I'm going to go ahead and just stop the recording really quick. If I can.
Oh, yeah. You said the recordings would be on like the DPL's YouTube.
Yeah, so I will post this onto the DPL YouTube. There'll be a playlist for homework reviews, and I will send that link out to all of you guys. I'm going to stop sharing really quick. Oh, there we go.